welcome to Expeditionary Mindset, Lee. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. And as an expert and somebody who's been connecting the unacquainted with forest bathing, I would love to hear your thoughts on what this concept means to you, how it's different from walking through the woods, what you've experienced through engaging in
Inari.
Shinrin-yoku.
So I came to Kyoto about 4 years ago, but I wanted to be a tour guide. So I started looking for places to research. So Fushimi Inari became interesting for me because I started researching, and when I say research, I don't just read books. I ask people for their stories. I decided to do a 4.5 hour tour just about Mount Inari. At the point, there was no one else doing that. And when we went into the mountains, I would tell people about the political side of Mount Inari, how the Americans had a hand in changing some of the rituals, how the emperor used to fight off people trying to build more shrines on that mountain. And it was political, but also at the same time about nature because I love tea and we go plucking wild tea. Wild tea grows in Mount Inari without interference from humans. And the tea there is superb. It's extremely sweet and not bitter at all. So I guess all these slowly made Mount Inari more and more interesting to me, and eventually I became a tour guide specializing in just Mount Inari. Because of the tour, I started doing more and more meditation. I have to describe what people are doing in the forest. People are meditating, and so I started doing forest bathing, like literally going under waterfalls, and that's done by mostly just the shamans, but some people also. And there are other ways people meditate also, like sitting, of course, walking. And forest bathing is essentially all this. You see, just walking the forest, basically, that's it. You walk in the forest, but you slow down. So you use your sense of sight, of course, to look around, but listen to birds, try to spot things that really slows you down. So essentially, at its crux, forest bathing is walking the forest. The problem is people find it very hard to just walk. So you come up with new things like bird watching, moss watching, and that really, really connects people down back to the level of nature, where you just appreciate nature for what it is. So that's how I got into the forest bathing part.
As you've gotten to know Mount Inari better and start guiding other people to experience this place through forest bathing, what have you seen in yourself?
I
Have
was
you
quite involved in meditation, but after a while, I fell out of meditation. That was just before university. And when I came to Mount Inari, I was brought back into the world of meditation. And when you meditate, sometimes it's just tough to just sit down. So the waterfalls really do help because when you go under the cold water, sometimes you get a sense of peace from the mountain. You feel small once again, but at the same time, energized once you leave the waterfall. So with that, I think it was a kind of, I wouldn't say inspiration, but it was a way to make me feel like I could get in touch with meditation again. So the change for in me for the meditation part has been I can now do the various meditations that people do there better. For example, people sweep. Uh, they use brooms for meditation. I can sweep better now, I guess. Also, I can stand under longer on the waterfalls. I can feel more peaceful faster. So I guess that's the change if you talk about meditation. But the other change that I sort of like is that now I'm more interested in plants. And when I first started a tour, people were asking me, "Oh, what's this plant?" And I could tell them roughly what it was, but not the exact scientific name or what it was for. The thing is, in the forest we have all sorts of plants growing, but people normally don't notice the small stuff, small tiny little flowers, and also big flowers. Sometimes they come out and nobody knows what they are. So I started researching, and of course, I had the help of friends who are botanists. I can now name many plants in the Japanese forest. Let's say near a park near near your home, if you have a park nearby, if you go to it again and again, you notice small things that other people won't. So I found in my 4 years of guiding people at Mount Inari, I never found the tour repetitive. It was always new every day because every single day you see something slightly different. For example, okay, the seasons are different. In Japan, we have 24 seasons. That's the 24 season calendar that you look at, and you can really see the changes happening according to that calendar. But also at the same time, you see people change. Like this lady suddenly appears on Tuesdays instead of Mondays. This man, the volunteer, has hurt his knee. You get to speak to people. So the thing is that if you go to the same place again and again, you notice all these extra things, and you appreciate the small little changes that happen every day. So I guess that was one part, but the second part is if you go down to the level of the moss and you really look at the different kinds of moss in the forest, you see them developing every single day too. And every single year, they look different from year to year. Every spring, let's say around March, this time of year, if you look at this plant, next year it will be completely different. The trouble is sometimes birds come and eat stuff, and suddenly the plant is completely gone. The same for tea. The tea plant could be surviving this year, next year it doesn't. So it gives a feeling of transience to it, and you really appreciate every single part. One of the times when it became very obvious to me how transient the whole thing could be was when a typhoon happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago in September, there was a huge typhoon, and the whole mountain is seriously affected. The trails had been crushed by trees, telephone poles had come down. The mountain was shut for about 2 weeks for repairs, and that just showed me how impermanent everything was. Even though the rocks, even though the shrines, they're mostly made of rock, the rocks were toppled, and the trees that were very old, some of them came crashing down. So even especially if you go forest bathing, you'll notice tiny things in forest, and when they go missing, you get a sense that yeah, it's been there for 100 years, but tomorrow it could be gone. So you appreciate it a lot more.
Oh, I've heard that you also offer virtual forest bathing experiences, which is fascinating. It's hard to imagine what that would be like.
I
And
know.
especially because it's such a sensory experience, how do you capture that as well as you can for somebody who's sitting behind a screen? And do you think that that there are maybe other benefits to doing a virtual forest bathing experience, or how do you conceptualize it?
Right. So, last year when COVID struck, I think it was around April when nobody could come to Japan. That was when the borders closed, and I think that was around when Airbnb mentioned they were going to start this new project for online experiences. By June, I told Airbnb, yeah, actually the Inari tour, it could become a online thing also if I just focus on one part, the forest bathing. So that was how the forest bathing tour was born, and like thousands of people have been on it, and most of them, actually many of them, say that it feels like they're there. So that's partially part of the thing, but the other thing is that forest bathing techniques, they can be done at home. Forest bathing has to be done in a forest. The techniques can be brought anywhere. So I guess I do sound meditation and stuff like that. Like for example, I have this, and you're supposed to close your eyes and only open your eyes when the sound of the bell completely goes away. So what I do during the experience is, hang on, and some people open their eyes here, others maybe now, and it becomes sort of a fun group game that everyone does virtually with me. So all these techniques like sound meditation, you have walking meditation also, sitting, of course, the breath meditation you do sitting. All these things can be done remotely. So what I show people are techniques they can use around their home. So one misconception most people have is that they must be in a forest, but in Mount Inari, the people there always say all these techniques can be done at home. You don't have to do it in Mount Inari. Just find another place with a few trees, and you could be forest bathing wherever you are. Thankfully, most people live near a park of sorts, because most people live where there are trees, so it's doable wherever you are.
You're connecting with me today from Kyoto,
Uh-huh.
but I know that you have a lot of other projects, or at least one really big project that you're working on that also is connected to nature. And I'm curious if you want to share a little bit about how your forest bathing experiences, your nature experiences in Kyoto have inspired you to immerse yourself a little bit more deeply in Japanese nature and take your efforts to share it with others to the next level.
Right. So, and I have always been interested in how how nature can sort of regulate itself and make stuff grow. After all, the forest grows just by itself without the help of humans. If humans go inside, we actually ruin the forest most of the time. So I became interested in something called natural farming, looking at how people were destroying things by over planning, overthinking things. And in the end, farming for naturally, as in having seeds of all sorts grow in the same place, humans intervene not too much, just clipping off what they want to eat, and maybe trimming some bushes down. I think that really struck me as a good way to farm, but I wanted to see if it worked. So I've always wanted to run a small little farm somewhere, but I never found the time until COVID came around. It's deep in the mountains, and I found a plot of land that was for rent. And it was not expensive for a house that is 120 years old and another that's about 60 years old. Both built without nails. They are originally farmhouses. Of course, they were kind of broken down, which is why I need to repair them and clean them out. So that's what I've been doing over the last few months. And I'm happy to say that in April, I can move there almost full time. I'll stay in Kyoto partially and live there most of the time. I will be starting to keep bees, so I'm making lots of beehives now. I have dumped lots of seed balls, so balls full of seeds, and the land will decide what will grow. And hopefully by the end of the year, a farm to table cafe. So let's see how it works out.
You're capturing your experiences almost in real time, which is fascinating, and it's such a cool way to address your interests during COVID and build something completely new and transformational for whenever the pandemic ends. Can you share how people can get in touch with you and find out a little bit more about your projects?
Sure. So the farm is called Ryunohara. Ryu means dragon, Hara means the field. So you'll be led on to my personal Instagram, LeeXJ, and Maury's Instagram, Maury the doggo. So there are quite a lot of ways to get in touch.
Do you have any recent inspirations that you can share with all of us?
So as I was cleaning up the house, it's 120 years old. I saw traces of life there from ages ago. I think there was a little girl who lived there maybe like 60 years ago. She's probably not a little girl now. And what we do during in forest bathing in Mount Inari is cleaning is a very important aspect. So we do sweeping meditation, for example. And I really began to appreciate the sweeping meditation because I was sweeping and sweeping. It never ended because the house was really dusty, and you sort of feel a calmness when you clean. So this I guess is one way you can forest bathe without actually going into the forest. Just go into your home and start scrubbing. Maybe that's the inspiration that I have for everyone. But that's something that people do in Mount Inari for real. They sweep the floor. If you see cleaning as a chore, then moving to an old farmhouse would be a nightmare. So I'm choosing to see it in a brighter spot. Like when I'm oiling the wood, I start to see the nice colors coming out. I'm like, whoa! I'm like polishing this and revealing a treasure. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I wish you many more treasures as you start to get further into your projects at Ryunohara. And thank you so much for sharing with us today about forest bathing, nature, your farmhouse project, and all of the contributions that you're making to the Koyasan area and to Kyoto. So thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure also to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Mori.
Bye bye.